Welcome back. Tonight we're diving into the sleepover, a childhood ritual that's equal parts fun and fear. But sometimes these nights take a dark turn, leaving scars that last a lifetime. The stories you'll hear tonight are true, sent in by viewers who survived nights they'll never forget. So turn down the lights, get comfortable, and prepare for tales that will haunt you long after the video ends. Let's begin. Our first story comes from Mark. He recounts an experience that has haunted him since childhood, a chilling encounter that blurred the line between youthful imagination and something far more sinister. It all began when he was 12 years old, during a seemingly ordinary winter night spent at his friend Leo's house. Little did he know, this innocent sleepover would become a night etched in his memory, a testament to the unsettling secrets that can lurk in the most familiar of places. Leo's house was an old one, the kind that creaked and groaned with age, its history whispering through the walls. The basement, in particular, held a certain mystique, a cold, unfinished space that seemed to exist outside the realm of the cozy, lived-in rooms above. It was a place where shadows danced freely, and the air hung heavy with an unspoken chill. The boys, eager to escape the winter chill, descended into the basement, their laughter echoing in the cavernous space. They immediately gravitated towards the pool table. The green felt a vibrant splash of color against the stark concrete. Fueled by youthful energy and the promise of a night of fun, they devoured pizza with gusto, the cheesy aroma filling the air. Each slice was a burst of flavor, a momentary distraction from the unsettling atmosphere of the basement. Hours melted away as they lost themselves in the pixelated worlds of video games, their thumbs flying across the controllers. The flickering light of the old television cast dancing shadows on the walls, adding to the basement's already eerie ambiance. For that night, the basement was their kingdom, a sanctuary where they could be boys, free from the constraints of the adult world. They reveled in their youthful abandon, unaware of the unsettling presence that was about to make itself known. But as midnight crept in, a subtle shift occurred. The air grew colder, the shadows deepened, and a sense of unease began to permeate the room. The carefree laughter faded, replaced by a growing sense of apprehension. It was then that Mark heard it, a faint, unsettling scraping sound emanating from the darkest corner of the basement, near the old laundry chute. It was a sound that seemed to claw at the edges of his hearing, a subtle but persistent disturbance in the night's quietude. Initially, Leo brushed it off as the house settling, or perhaps just their imaginations running wild. He tried to reassure Mark, dismissing his concerns with a shrug and a dismissive wave of his hand. But the noise persisted, growing louder with each passing moment. It became more deliberate, more insistent, a distinct scraping like something heavy being dragged slowly across the rough concrete floor. The sound was undeniable, impossible to ignore. A chill ran down their spines. They instinctively muted the TV, silencing the artificial noise in an attempt to isolate the source of the unsettling sound. There was no denying it now. The sound was real, and it was coming from somewhere within the basement. A sense of dread washed over them. Armed with nothing but a flashlight, its beam cutting through the oppressive darkness, they decided to investigate. With hesitant steps, they crept toward the shadows, their hearts pounding in their chests like frantic drums. Each creak of the floorboards, each rustle of unseen objects amplified their fear, turning the familiar basement into a labyrinth of potential horrors. The flashlight beam danced across the room, revealing nothing but the mundane objects of a forgotten space, old furniture draped in white sheets, their ghostly forms adding to the unsettling atmosphere. But then they saw it, fresh drag marks etched in the thick layer of dust that coated the floor. The marks were distinct, undeniable evidence that something had been moving in the basement, something heavy and unseen. A wave of icy fear washed over them as a low, guttural breathing echoed from behind a large, sheet-covered wardrobe. The sound was raspy and labored, like something struggling to draw breath. Leo, his voice trembling slightly, called out into the darkness, hoping to dispel the growing sense of dread. But only the raspy breathing replied, closer now, more menacing. Suddenly, the sheet covering the wardrobe bulged outward, as if something large and unseen was pressing against it from the inside. A tall, thin shape began to rise beneath the sheet, its form distorted and elongated, its proportions all wrong. It was a grotesque silhouette, a mockery of the human form. And then, two glowing white eyes appeared, piercing the darkness like malevolent stars. They were cold and devoid of emotion, burning with an unnatural intensity. With a slow, deliberate movement, the sheet slid down, revealing the figure in its entirety, a faceless, inhuman entity that defied description. It was a creature of nightmare, a manifestation of pure terror. The sight shattered their paralysis. Terror seized them, and they bolted for the stairs, their legs pumping, their breath catching in their throats. They didn't stop running until they reached the top of the stairs, slamming the basement door shut and frantically locking it behind them, as if a simple lock could contain the horror they had just witnessed. Leo's parents, awakened by the commotion, found nothing amiss when they cautiously checked the basement. They dismissed the boys' frantic story as a product of overactive imaginations, but the boys refused to ever go back down there. Mark never slept over at Leo's house again, and Leo himself avoided the basement from that night on, forever haunted by the memory of what they had seen in the shadows. The experience left an indelible mark on their young minds, a chilling reminder of the unknown horrors that can lurk just beyond the veil of reality. Years later, Leo confessed that he sometimes still hears that faint scraping sound, a subtle but persistent reminder of that terrifying night. It's a sound that echoes in the depths of his memory, a chilling testament to the enduring power of fear. He hears it beneath the floorboards, a subtle scratching that seems to come from the very foundations of the house, a haunting reminder that some shadows never truly leave, and that the things that scare us most often reside in the darkest corners of our minds. Our next story comes from Chloe, a tale that chills you to the bone. It's a stark reminder that sometimes the most terrifying threats are the ones we never see coming. This is a story about innocence lost, about the shattering of a sense of security, and about the lingering fear that can haunt you long after the danger has passed. Prepare yourself, because Chloe's experience is not for the faint of heart, who was 15 and excited to be at a sleepover with her closest friends. It was a night of carefree fun, the kind of night where worries are left at the door and laughter fills every corner of the room. They had planned this sleepover for weeks, eagerly anticipating the chance to bond, share secrets, and create memories that would last a lifetime. Little did they know, this night would be etched in their minds for a very different reason. The sleepover was at Jessica's house, a spacious suburban home that felt safe and familiar. Jessica's parents were away for the weekend, leaving the girls with a sense of freedom and independence. They reveled in the opportunity to have the house to themselves, turning up the music, dancing in the living room, and feeling like they were on top of the world. The night was young, and the possibilities seemed endless. The night was filled with the usual sleepover staples, mountains of pizza, devoured with teenage enthusiasm. Each slice was a burst of flavor, fueling their energy and adding to the festive atmosphere. They shared stories, gossiped about school crushes, and laughed until their stomachs hurt. It was a perfect night, or so it seemed. Horror movies, the cheesier the better, flickering on the television screen. They huddled together on the couch, jumping at every scare, their screams echoing through the house. They knew the movies were fake, but the thrill of the suspense was undeniable. It was all part of the fun, a way to test their courage and bond over shared fear. And laughter, uncontrollable, infectious laughter that bounced off the walls. They were in their own little world, a bubble of friendship and joy, oblivious to the darkness that lurked just beyond their awareness. They felt safe, secure, and completely carefree, until they decided to play a game of hide-and-seek in the dark, a seemingly harmless activity that would soon turn into a nightmare. The lights were switched off, plunging the house into an eerie darkness, punctuated only by the occasional flash of lightning outside. The game was on, and the girls scattered, eager to find the best hiding spots. Chloe, seeking the ultimate hiding place, crept into the master bedroom closet, a cavernous space filled with clothes and shadows. She squeezed between the hanging garments, hoping to remain undetected. The darkness enveloped her, amplifying every creak and groan of the old house. Her heart was racing, a frantic drumbeat against her ribs, as she strained to listen for the footsteps of her friends. Each sound was magnified in the darkness, making it difficult to distinguish between reality and imagination. She held her breath, trying to remain as still and silent as possible. But instead of the playful footsteps of Jessica or the giggling of her other friends, she heard a man's cough, a sound that sent a shiver of dread down her spine. It was low, gravelly, and unmistakably adult, a sound that had no place in their innocent game. It was a sound that spoke of danger, of intrusion, of something terribly wrong. Through the narrow crack in the closet door, her eyes darted around, trying to make sense of what she was hearing. she saw a dark figure moving in the dim light of the bedroom. The figure was rifling through the drawers of the dresser, their movements frantic and desperate. She watched in horror as the figure pocketed jewelry, their actions confirming her worst fears. This wasn't a game, this was real. Frozen in terror, paralyzed by fear, Chloe barely breathed, afraid that even the slightest sound would betray her presence. She was praying with every fiber of her being that the intruder wouldn't check the closet, that he would simply move on and leave her unharmed. After what felt like an eternity, hours stretching into an agonizing blur, the man finally left the room, disappearing as quietly as he'd come. Chloe waited, her body trembling, then ran to find her friends, desperate to tell them what she had witnessed. Initially, they thought she was joking, dismissing her story as an overactive imagination, until they saw the genuine panic in her eyes, the raw fear that couldn't be faked. A quick check revealed the horrifying truth. The front door was unlocked, a silent invitation to the intruder. The man had simply walked in, unnoticed, while they were lost in their games and laughter. Police were called, and they confirmed the burglary, taking fingerprints and collecting evidence. But despite their efforts, the thief was never caught, remaining a phantom in the shadows. The girls were left with the chilling realization that he'd been in the house with them the whole time, moving silently through the shadows as they played their games, a predator lurking in their midst. Chloe never felt truly safe in a house at night again, the sense of security forever shattered by that terrifying experience. She was haunted by the memory of that cough, a constant reminder of the danger that had been so close. And she carried with her the chilling knowledge that sometimes the real danger isn't lurking outside, but is already inside, hidden in plain sight. Our final story tonight comes from Ethan. It's a tale that chills to the bone, a haunting experience that he'll never truly escape. It all began with a simple invitation, a weekend getaway to a new farmhouse. Ethan recounts the time he spent a night at his friend Sam's newly acquired farmhouse, a place Sam's family had just moved into, eager to start a new chapter. Little did they know, the house had chapters of its own, dark and disturbing ones. From the moment they arrived, there was something undeniably off about the place, a heavy, unsettling atmosphere that seemed to cling to the very walls. It was more than just an old house. It felt like a place where something terrible had occurred. The air was thick with a sense of unease, a palpable tension that made the hairs on the back of your neck stand on end. Trying to shake off the unsettling feeling, they did what any teenagers would do, set up video games, hoping to fill the silence with the sounds of digital adventure and friendly competition. They arranged their controllers, powered on the console, and dove headfirst into the virtual world, attempting to ignore the growing sense of dread that permeated the old house. But as the evening wore on, Ethan began to hear faint whispers, a subtle murmur that seemed to emanate from the very structure of the house itself. It was a sound just at the edge of hearing, a fleeting brush of voices that sent shivers down his spine. The whispers were impossible to ignore, a persistent and unnerving presence that gnawed at his sense of calm. He tried to focus on the game, but the subtle sounds kept pulling him back, drawing his attention to the unsettling silence that lay beneath the surface. Sam, caught up in the excitement of the game, initially dismissed it as the house settling or just Ethan's imagination running wild. He laughed it off, attributing the sounds to the quirks of an old building. But as night deepened and the shadows grew longer and more menacing, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. The playful atmosphere of the evening began to dissipate, replaced by a growing sense of unease. It was no longer a faint murmur, but a chorus of voices, a cacophony of hushed tones that seemed to swirl around them, pressing in from all sides. The voices were urgent and unintelligible, a jumble of words and phrases that made no sense, yet conveyed a sense of desperate warning. Ethan felt an overwhelming urge to understand what they were saying, to decipher the secrets hidden within the walls. The whispers seemed to be seeping from the walls themselves, as if the very structure of the house was trying to communicate something. The old wallpaper seemed to ripple and shift, the cracks in the plaster widening into gaping mouths. Lying in the dark, the video games long forgotten, the two boys huddled in their sleeping bags, their hearts pounding in their chests. The oppressive silence of the room was broken only by the incessant whispers that filled their ears. It was then that both boys finally heard it, a distinct voice cutting through the murmur, a sound that would forever be etched into their memories. It was a woman's voice, clear and chilling, laced with an undercurrent of desperation and dread. She was uttering a single word, "Get Silence fell, thick and absolute, heavier than any darkness they had ever experienced. The whispers ceased, leaving behind an unnerving void, a pregnant pause that amplified their fear. Terrified beyond reason, they scrambled out of their sleeping bags and fled to the brightly lit living room, seeking refuge in the artificial glow of the lamps. But even in the light, the fear lingered, clinging to them like a shroud. They were unable to sleep, haunted by the whispers and the chilling voice that had pierced the darkness. The next morning, the oppressive atmosphere of the house hadn't lifted. Sam's parents, seeing the boys' distress, finally revealed the house's dark history, a secret they had hoped to keep buried. Decades ago, a man, driven to madness, had murdered his entire family in a fit of rage. The gruesome act had taken place in that very room where the boys had spent the night, unknowingly sleeping in a place of unimaginable horror. After committing the heinous crime, the man had hidden inside the walls of the house, a secret compartment where he remained, undiscovered, until he died, his spirit forever trapped within the confines of his prison. The whispers, they believed, were not just the sounds of an old house settling. They were echoes of that unspeakable horror, the tormented souls of the murdered family crying out from beyond the grave. A warning to stay away, or perhaps a desperate claim on the space. A refusal to let the living forget the tragedy that had unfolded within those walls. Sam's family, unable to cope with the weight of the house's history and the constant feeling of being watched, moved out within months. They couldn't bear the oppressive presence, the feeling that they were living in a tomb, haunted by the ghosts of the past. Ethan, deeply shaken by the experience, never returned to the farmhouse. He remains forever haunted by the memory of the whispering walls, a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of the most ordinary places. The house stands empty to this day, a silent testament to the horrors it holds, waiting for its next unsuspecting victims. The silence after a terrifying story lingers, making every creak and shadow feel closer. Tonight's tales remind us that even the safest places can hide real horror. Have you ever had a sleepover that turned dark? Share your story in the comments. Thanks for joining me in the shadows. If you want more true horror, subscribe and turn on notifications. Until next time, stay safe and try to get some sleep. Good night.